Borley Rectory, in the tiny East Anglian hamlet whose name it bears, was once known as the most haunted house in England. Many people, 5 successive rectors, their wives and families, neighbours and visitors, all apparently saw things there. And the legend lives on.
I've been involved with Borley for over 40 years, 27 years as editor of the local paper. And in every year of those 40 years, something has been reported as happening at Borley. There's nothing there, there's no shop, there's no pub. In fact, the last place that you'd expect to see a stream of visitors.
So how and why has the quiet of the English countryside been so disrupted? Ever since Borley Rectory was built in 1863, reports have abounded of strange whisperings, a ghostly presence, and mysterious so-called accidents. It all began with the daughters of the first vicar. And a truly haunting vision. At the end of the garden, they saw a figure, its head bowed as if in prayer. One of the sisters stepped forward, but as she did, it seemed to vanish into thin air. Peter Underwood, who's been investigating Borley for 40 years, recalls meeting the sisters.
They were much travelled and intelligent and educated people. They weren't fools, and they certainly wouldn't allow themselves to make stories up to impress other people.
The legend established, claims continued of strange happenings at Borley Rectory. 2 decades later, it was the turn of the Reverend Eric Smith and his wife. They described more voices, footsteps, and servant bells ringing of their own accord. Then, while tidying a cupboard, Mrs. Smith made a gruesome discovery. Wrapped in brown paper, a skull. Beginning to doubt their sanity, the Smiths asked a national newspaper to investigate.
This story could run and run. It seems everyone round here has seen or heard of something. Harry Price? You mean the psychic expert?
The newspaper called in the ghost-busting services of Harry Price.
Reverend Smith and Miss Smith.
Oh.
Harry was a former engineer whose marriage to a rich wife meant he could spend his time and her money delving into the paranormal. Mostly he set out to expose psychic frauds. But were the events the Smiths described a fraud? If he had any doubts about Borley, Harry Price soon experienced strange events at first hand.
Did you see that?
It came from upstairs, but there's no one there.
Harry and the reporter had a narrow escape from a flying candlestick. But there was something of the showman in Harry Price too. He left his paranormal collection to London University. Alan Wesencraft, who looks after it, met the man himself.
I think Harry Price's enthusiasm did lead him into making exaggerated claims. He's had a fertile imagination, and this would take charge, I suppose.
Harry Price told his story to the world, but the Smiths had had enough. They moved out. Several vicars turned down the job before a new one could be found. The Reverend Lionel Algernon Foyster was old enough to be the father of his wife, Marianne.
Lovely day, thank you very much. Tea looks excellent. And it's a lovely day, and the lavender looks beautiful.
Yes, it is a nice day, isn't it? Quite quiet round here after London, though, don't you find?
Life in this backwater was hardly her style, but the paranormal events were.
The poor girl really craved something a little bit more exciting. And she found excitement, I think, by playing up the idea of the haunts.
Lionel, look at this.
What is it, dear?
Pebbles under my pillow. How on earth did they get there? You must write this up in your diary.
Suspicions that the old vicar was fooled by his wife might have been justified.
First, my collar, which I'd taken off for comfort, is thrown at me. then a stick, and a piece of coal thrown across the room.
But what about the testimony of independent witnesses? A local headmaster and magistrate, Guy Lestrange, wrote about taking tea with the Foysters.
The other day, the servants' bells started to ring all on their own.
What was that?
Jumping up, I hurried to the door and found the floor outside littered with broken crockery.
It's starting to happen all over again.
Mary! Yes, well, you see, you can never tell what's going to happen in this house. Let's finish our tea while our cups are still intact.
Still not fully convinced, the magistrate returned to his seat. No sooner had he done so,
An appalling series of crashes took us back to the doorway.
and this time Guy Lestrange couldn't believe his eyes.
Bottles were being hurled about in all directions in the hall, though nobody could be seen throwing them.
Good God.
When the Foysters left, Harry Price's big moment arrived. He took a year's lease on the rectory and moved in. He placed an advertisement in the Times, inviting people of leisure and intellect to assist in his investigation. Charles Wintour, later a distinguished newspaper editor, was one of those who took up the invitation.
I went to Borley Rectory with an entirely open mind. I was just curious what was happening there. I was convinced that Harry Price was egging it up a bit. There was something occurring, but he was making it more so.
Yes, this looks interesting. I think you can seal this one up. You know what.
In order to make certain that nobody was interfering with the house, we would place cotton thread across the doors and across the passages so that nobody could sneak up.
When they returned, they found the seals intact. But on inspecting the rooms, Charles Wintour and his friend found marks had appeared on the walls, scratches and indecipherable messages.
On one occasion, I thought one of the pencil marks was actually moving as I saw it. It seems mad, but I think that's what I saw.
Harry Price reaped the rewards of his research. His findings were published in best-selling books. Borley Rectory became famous as the most haunted house in England. Until one night, there was a fire. The rectory was reduced to a ruin. Arson was suspected but could never be proved. With the rectory gone, the haunting was thought to be over. In any case, for many, Harry Price's exaggerations and Marianne Foyster's confessions, made to investigators like Peter Underwood, had discredited the story. But was there still more to it?
There were things going on at Borley long before Marianne went there. There were things going on at Borley long before Harry Price went there. And there were things happening at Borley long after Marianne left and long after Harry Price was dead.
The new vicar buried bones found during the rectory demolition and began to claim new happenings across the road at Borley Church itself.
He was the one, more than anyone else, who moved the ghost from one side of the road to the other. He was the man who said, you know, that strange things are happening in my church. I've seen things in my church. I've heard things in my church. And because he was the vicar or the rector, people believed him.
It's in the medieval church that Ron Russell and other psychic investigators have continued Harry Price's work. One night, he and a small team set up tape recorders there.
To our surprise, we received a series of strange, unaccountable noises on the tapes. I've no doubt in my own mind that these sounds were paranormal.
And the stories of unexplained incidents continue.
Just heard what sounded like an organ playing from inside the church. But as we went in the church, it suddenly stopped. To our utter amazement, there was not a soul in the church. The organ console was closed and padlocked.
Once we were inside the church, we carried on looking round when I was aware of the sound of pebbles falling down on the ground. I looked, but I couldn't actually see any pebbles.
Like all the other claims surrounding Borley over the years, there is an explanation, but an incomplete one.
Some local boys confessed that they'd been hiding in the church. One had pumped the organ up and the other had played a few bars, and they then died behind the pews. Since then, in recent times, the church has been locked, and still people are saying they're hearing the organ. What do you make of that? I don't know.
Harry Price died 9 years after Borley Rectory was destroyed. Almost immediately, books were published tearing his work to shreds. But expert opinion is divided. Though they agree his claims were exaggerated, many still back him. And to this day, a special library is dedicated to him at London University. And of course, Harry, wherever he is now, can't be accused of interfering in events since his death. At least not if he's sitting in one of these.